When contemplating a new digital transformation, organizations often struggle with how to sell the idea and the value of transformation to their executive teams. But how exactly do you do that? How do you sell the idea of digital transformation to your executive team? That's what I'm going to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And as I mentioned at the top of the video, selling your digital transformation to executive teams is something that's very important. Sometimes, once in a while, digital transformations are actually driven by the executive team, and it's more of a top-down initiative. But more often than not, the need for digital transformation or the want to go through a digital transformation is identified at the lower levels of the organization, and it eventually works its way up to the executive team for approval. But the problem is that so many project teams and employees within organizations that recognize the need for digital transformation don't necessarily know how to sell the idea to their executives, or they don't know how to speak the language of executive teams to really get the points across that are most important to them. So what I want to talk about in today's video is the key ways that we see our clients be most successful in selling the idea and the value of digital transformation to their executive teams. One of the most common reasons why organizations are going through digital transformations here in the 2020s is because of this whole concept called technical debt. And technical debt is admittedly a buzzword that was created by industry analysts of some sort. And even though it's a buzzword, it's something that can be very relevant to executive teams. And what I mean by that is that when you think about technical debt, what technical debt really is the investments that you haven't been making in technology in the years leading up to where you are today. And the reason this is so important is because as you've not been investing in technology over the course of years or decades, technology has advanced significantly. Other organizations, your peers and competitors have advanced significantly, but you haven't. So that's where the whole concept of technical debt comes from, is that delta or that gap between technology you have today versus technology you could have if you had continued to invest in technology. And ultimately, as that chasm grows or as that divide grows between where you are today and the competencies of technologies in the future, that gap grows to the point where you've accumulated so much technical debt that you need to make a change of some sort. So this can be a good way or a good starting point to sell the whole idea and the value of digital transformation to your executive team. Although I will say that this alone is not going to get the job done. It's just one part of how to sell the idea to executives. And quite frankly, some of the other points I'll make in this video are going to be a lot more important than this one. The second benefit or area of business value that tends to resonate more with executives than not is this concept of increasing or improving the customer experience. So in other words, we're going to deploy technology not just for technology's sake, but as a way to provide better value to our customers or our stakeholders. And so the key here is to really quantify and recognize exactly how technology and digital transformation in general is going to help you provide better service to your customers. And by having this clear vision and focus on customer experience and measurable business value, that's generally going to speak volumes and speak more clearly to executives and will convey the value of the transformation to executives in a better way than if you just focus on the technology itself. So it's really focusing on the end result that we expect to get out of digital transformation, particularly as it relates to the customer experience. Another example of how you can sell the idea of digital transformation to your executive team is to focus on how it affects employee engagement, how it increases employee stickiness, how it increases morale, how it decreases employee attrition potentially. It's really focusing on how you can make for a better work environment for your employees. And on the surface, this may sound very touchy-feely or like an intangible business benefit, but at the end of the day, it is a tangible business benefit. If you think about organizations that are trying to hire younger people just out of college, but that same organization is also using an old green screen mainframe system, there's a big disconnect right there, and you're ultimately creating a negative employee experience for this younger generation that doesn't even understand this whole concept of green screens and transaction codes and old school mainframes. So that might be an extreme example, but it is an example of how your lack of technical maturity as an organization is actually going to create problems attracting and retaining talent and keeping them engaged within the organization. So again, this whole idea of focusing on the end result we expect to get out of the transformation is something that's very important to executives, and employee engagement is a key part of that business value that your transformation might provide. Another business benefit that really speaks to executives in the ways they think about whether or not they want to move forward with a capital investment like a digital transformation would be this concept of operational efficiency and the overall scalability of the organization. So most organizations we work with are going through digital transformation at the same time they're growing, they're going through changes as an organization, and at some point they outgrow the technologies they have, and the technologies they have become a liability because it's creating bottlenecks and things that undermine the scalability of the organization. So in other words, the organization isn't going to be able to grow very effectively with the technology it has. So if we can point to and show how the digital transformation is going to increase operational efficiency in a measurable way, and how it's going to improve the overall scalability of the organization and the ability to grow in the future with less people or less investments in the future, that's ultimately going to speak to what executives look for. Now, another dimension of this whole operational component that I'm talking about here is not just the end result of what happens after the digital transformation in terms of the operational efficiency, but it's also proactively addressing a common concern that executives have, which is related to operational disruption during the transformation. So this is really an opportunity to get ahead of and proactively address a common concern that executives have, which is that we want to make sure that we deploy new technology in a way that isn't going to disrupt our operations. Now, I'm not referring to common everyday pains that come along with the digital transformation. For example, employees oftentimes struggle with learning new technology and it makes you less efficient in the short term. That's more of a common operational disruption. What I'm talking about is more the material operational disruption, those big showstoppers, things like not being able to ship products, not being able to close the books, not being able to track the status of customer orders. Those sorts of potential operational disruptions are what terrify a lot of executives. And for most executives, that's on their mind. They're going to worry about that. They're going to ask about that. So when you're selling the idea of digital transformation to them, if you can proactively address this concern that they all have, that's a great way to build confidence and ensure that they understand that you've thought these things through and that you have a clear strategy to address those potential operational disruptions. So when we think about operational efficiencies and the end result we expect to get out of the transformation, we do certainly have to look at the risk mitigation aspect of ensuring we don't mess things up at the time of go live and cause operational disruption. But just as importantly, maybe even more importantly, we want to look at the longer term value of how we'll improve the efficiency and the scalability of the organization. Now, I've talked about a few different areas here so far that are relevant to business value and return on investment, but it's worth noting separately that you do want to specify and quantify all the different business benefits you expect to get out of this transformation. And it's important to be realistic and identify realistically how you think you're going to achieve that value, what you think that value is going to be. And you also want to be realistic about the cost side of the equation as well. So you can do a cost-benefit ROI analysis based on reality rather than sales hype or overinflated numbers. So it's really important that you don't rely on your software vendor who's trying to sell you software. That's probably the last place you want to go for inputs into your business case and understanding the business value, but rather looking objectively and independently at what can we realistically expect to achieve as a result of this transformation. And ultimately, we want to be able to sell that to executives and hold ourselves as a team accountable for achieving those benefits longer term. So if we can identify business value and ROI and sell that to the executives, that's ultimately what they look at and what they'll commonly refer to when making a decision about whether or not to move forward with the digital transformation. And finally, but not least importantly, is risk mitigation. Executives oftentimes think in terms of how do we mitigate risks, how do we manage risks, and even prior to that, how do we identify the risk? How do we make sure that we're not blindsided by some of these failure points that so many organizations go through? So having thought through what our risk mitigation strategy is, how we'll have risk identification processes in place, risk management processes in place, and overall project governance structure in place, the more we've thought through that stuff, and again, proactively address the concern that most executives have, the more likely it is that we'll put their minds at ease and they'll be more likely to accept and embrace the idea of digital transformation. So risk is one of those things that we want to assume or hope that it doesn't happen, and we want to think that if we manage this project well, those risks will just go away, but that's not reality. The reality is there are a lot of risks in transformation no matter how well you manage it. The key is how well do you identify the risks and how well do you mitigate those risks. The better job you can do there, the more successful you're going to be. And the better job you do in articulating that risk mitigation strategy to your executive team, the more likely they are to buy into the whole concept of digital transformation. Now, one other comment I'll make about risk mitigation is that oftentimes when we're trying to sell the idea of transformation to executives, we tend to be overly optimistic. We're humans, we're excited about this, we really want them to buy into this concept of digital transformation. But it's really important to throttle back that excitement, to be realistic and be pragmatic and recognize the risks, recognize the dark side or the potential dark side of a transformation. Because the better job we do that, whether it's in terms of identifying potential risks or putting in project governance processes or something different, the better job we do at those things, the more comfort executives are going to find in knowing that you're not just being overly optimistic, you're not just spitting back sales messaging from your software vendor or from your system integrator to help sell the idea. You've actually thought through some of the risks and some of the challenges that organizations commonly go through. So that's a key point as well, is to make sure that you're realistic about your risk mitigation strategies. So these are a few ways that I hope have helped you identify ways that you can sell the concept of digital transformation to your organization. One other note I'll make is that the better job you can do of educating yourself and understanding what to expect during digital transformation, what some of the common lessons learned are from other organizations, what some of the best practices are in terms of how to deploy new technologies, the more you can educate yourself and be in a situation where you can talk intelligently about digital transformation, the more likely you are to sell the concept to your executive team. So in order to do that, in addition to watching this and other videos on our YouTube channel, I encourage you to check out some of the resources I've included below, which are meant to help educate you on providing best practices related to digital transformation, whether it's digital strategy, organizational change management, process improvement, project governance, quality assurance, whatever the case may be. We have a number of resources that I've included links to below. And the one I would start with, if I were you, is the annual digital transformation report that we publish each year. That's something that provides a host of best practices around digital transformations, independent software ratings and rankings, and other best practices to help you with your transformation. So I encourage you to download that with the link that I've included below. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.